Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished and senior professional from Austin, Texas, USA, Tissa Richards. Tissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited. So good to meet you.
Thank you. Tissa is a CEO, keynote speaker, leadership expert, corporate and board facilitator. She's a repeat software founder and CEO, and she's an author. And all of you know I'm very partial to authors. So she's an author of a book titled No Permission Needed, and we'll speak about her book. So Tissa, before we get into leadership, tell me about your own journey. And you did mention that you spent some time in India as well.
I did, yeah. So I'm sort of an accidental software founder and CEO. My background was in marketing and branding, and I have had an opportunity to invest in and run some pretty high-tech software companies. And after I did that and kind of burned out on raising money, I shifted over into helping other founders and entrepreneurs and large companies and teams sort of be very pragmatic in how they grow and really get that sort of alignment and reduce friction in their teams.
Fantastic. So let's talk about leadership. Let me start by asking you, what is your perspective on the meaning of leadership?
I really think this is an interesting question because I think we use this word so often and maybe don't stop and think about what it means.
Correct.
And I think that there's maybe sort of two sides of it, right? One is how do you create value for organizations and people?
Yeah.
And then I really like that thought of sort of taking it further. And then how do you maximize the potential of both people and organizations so that you can actually activate that potential? So at least that's what a good leader should do, right?
Well said. And a question I'm sure you've been asked many times, are leaders born or are they made?
You know, it's really interesting. I think that some people are maybe naturally leaders. You see it on the playground sometimes, little kids that are sort of naturally good at organizing others. And then some people I think are just naturally better individual contributors. So certainly some people I think are naturally born to lead or born to be more interested in leading others. Maybe those are people who are naturally tuned in to the needs of other people. I also think that you can nurture leaders to improve their skills. So I think you can make someone or guide them to be a better leader.
Very nice. And what makes a good leader?
So I think it's that focus on serving a team or an organization more so than promoting yourself. And I think some individual or some skills would be listening. So I always think the most influential person in a room is a person who's listening and not speaking. Empathy, helping to lift others up. So I think those sorts of skills really help you stand out as a very good leader.
Interesting. My other question to you, Tissa, is, and I've often asked this question, and this is about culture. You live in probably one of the most multicultural countries in the world. And, different cultures look at leadership differently. Different cultures look at how they will work in organizations differently. I'm sure you've worked with a lot of Indians, and Indians generally say, let my work speak for itself, so to speak. My question to you is, how does culture impact leadership?
I think this is interesting on two levels, because I think you have the culture of the individuals that make up the company, and then you have the sort of company culture, right? Or the organizational culture.
Correct.
And so I think it almost becomes bi-directional, right? So let me start with organizational culture. So in that case, you may have a culture that is not fostering good leadership or good team dynamics.
Correct.
And then you really can't blossom as a leader. That's hard. And really great leaders, you can't sort of turn that battleship. You can't really turn around a very dysfunctional culture. Wonderful cultures can improve and foster great leaders. But I say to people sometimes, why are you staying in a really toxic culture? Well, I want to make a change. That's great, but it's really going to impact your resilience and your effectiveness. And maybe we want to look at you going somewhere else where you can make a big impact. So that's sort of that organizational culture level.
Mm.
And I think that, to your point, which is such a good one, that the culture that you bring from, where you grew up, where you work, that also really makes an impact. I mean, I think that this idea of like, let your work speak for yourself, or I have some people say to me, Americans tend to be a little bit more, let me talk about myself. Let me show you what I can do, or talk about not my work, but me. And I think having an awareness, if you have the opportunity to work globally, I think you get that sense of what your priorities are, or how you communicate. And I think if you haven't had that exposure, it can be a little bit jarring sometimes to understand, hey, these people on my team, they don't understand why I would work a certain way or why I would speak a certain way. So does that impact leadership? I think maybe it impacts communication or understanding each other, maybe even more than leadership. So that's why I really encourage teams to also spend the time to do a lot of sort of just talking through, hey, how do you work? Why do you work that way? How do you communicate? Why do you communicate that way? I mean, there's some cultures in Europe where first you make a decision and then you discuss it, versus you discuss and then you make a decision. If you're not familiar with those cultural norms, you'll be very confused and potentially frustrated. So this is what I think boils down a lot to communication.
And I've got, on a lighter note, I've got to add one more aspect, which I've seen in some countries. First you discuss it, then you take a decision, and then the rest of the people criticize it, so.
Yes. Yeah. Or, I mean, even think about something like negotiations. In some countries, negotiations are a zero-sum game. Someone has to win, someone has to lose. And in other cultures, negotiation, it's good if everybody wins. So I think the cultural differences are really nuanced sometimes. And if you don't understand them, you could be pretty startled.
Absolutely. I agree. And based on all the work that you've been doing with so many different organizations as a leadership expert, do you think there are different types of leaders?
Absolutely. And I'm not a fan of sort of these official leadership tests. I mean, they exist for a reason. But, if someone comes up to me and says, hey, let me tell you my Myers-Briggs, let me tell you my Enneagram, I think that's great. But it's not necessarily helpful to me in the sense of, how do you lead and why? That's really important to me. I want to know, why do you lead a certain way? So not just your style, but how it manifests, and then how it matters to create value for people in the organization. And even more importantly to me is your leadership values. So, I mean, I'll have people say to me, hey, I lead with empathy. Well, that's great. But I want to know, why is that important to you? Is it a non-negotiable? How is that actually going to manifest as, let's say, an operating principle for you? So my preference when it comes to helping people build great teams or build great organizations is, tell me what kind of leader you are in your own words, because I think that's more powerful than just telling me sort of a bunch of letters that I now have to try and parse out.
Correct. Great response. Thank you. Another question that I have is, and I've spoken to so many people and I've worked with so many people, what, in your opinion, is the difference in leadership styles for the corporate world, the government, and maybe the social sector?
I work mostly in the corporate world and startups, and then really, really large companies. I think maybe the objectives and needs are different, but fundamentally, people are people, and leading people is leading people. So I think just like there's different types of people, different types of leaders, I think ultimately it's matching the objectives with your leadership style. I'm not sure if there's really if leadership needs to be that different versus aligning leadership with your objectives. Have you found that to be really different?
I have, in the corporate world, and I worked with many, the corporate world has one set of leaders, but when it comes to governments, there's a very, very different kind of leaders that you can expect to see, because they derive their power from a very different group of people, which could even be politicians. So moving on, My next question to you is on technology. And I've been speaking to many leaders. I wanted to understand from you, how is technology changing leadership?
I think we've really seen this. Yeah, I think we've really seen this with the pandemic too, where I think it tends to put a layer between people. And that can actually, I think, be kind of dangerous, because what happens is you lose a lot of the immediacy of leadership, right? So I think back to, I want to use an example or a story. I think back to when I was running my last company, and we had I'm not going to call it a rule, but we had sort of an operating norm where if you couldn't solve a problem with 3 emails, so the first one, the response, and the response, we just encouraged everybody to pick up the phone, because you could solve a lot of problems with just a quick conversation or a quick Zoom or a quick face-to-face if you're in the office. But the more layers of technology you add, an email, Slack, a text, you end up wasting a lot of time. You so much gets lost in technology translation. And then people get frustrated, and people bring more and more people, and they CC more and more people. And before you know it, a very simple, let's say, solving a customer problem or whatever it is, it takes up so much time and headspace and energy when you could probably solve that in 2 minutes by saying, hey, what's the deal here? How do we solve it? And so I think having, for example, just a 3 ping pong rule, and then saying, okay, let's just bring the human side back in. So in some ways we have to do it because we're more remote, we're more global, but reminding people that nothing really beats just getting face to face and saying, what's happening? Can we solve this really quickly? Correct. So I think there's pros, but there can be a lot of cons.
Couple of more questions on leadership, and then we'll move to your book. The next one is on the pandemic. And, we are all coming out of the pandemic, and I think hopefully we are out of it completely very soon. What is the impact, or what has been the impact of the pandemic on leaders around the world?
I mean, I think some of what we just talked about, right? So it can be hard to manage teams remotely. A lot of stress, obviously. I've been working with a lot of teams who've never met. They've built their entire leadership team, executive team, and then everyone below remotely. So there's been a lot of fun, like facilitating these offsites where people are meeting for the first time. They've worked together for 3 years. I think it's posed some challenges too of how do you sort of handle, for example, introverts and extroverts when you're on Zoom. It's a lot easier to do that in person. So I think it's been more challenging of how you sort of bring different groups of people together and equalize the playing field a little bit more in terms of speaking time, working styles. But I also think maybe it's given you an opportunity. You can find a great talent pool in a lot more spaces. Again, pros and cons.
Absolutely, I agree. And my last question to you on leadership, and this is about the young leaders, the millennials and the Gen Z leaders, who I have always said have brought a breath of fresh air into the world, into the leadership pattern. And I'm from the boomers generation. How are millennial leaders and Gen Z leaders defining the paradigm of leadership?
It's really interesting to me because I think there's a couple upsides and a couple downsides. So the upside is I think they're really pushing for a better work-life balance. And that's really important. And really focusing on resilience and how do we not burn out.
Correct.
I also see sometimes that there is a little bit, sometimes an expectation of, well, I should be the CEO. I should have a really senior position, maybe before I've learned a little bit. And I really encourage those younger leaders to seek out mentors and sponsors. I've had a few great founders and CEOs who've said to me, no, I don't need that introduction. I know it already. And I think, don't turn down introductions, don't turn down wisdom and insight and people sharing with you, because it's not so much that you need to put in time, 20 years, 30 years, but I want you to be open to learning so that maybe we can avoid years of mistakes or things. So I think I love the focus on balance, but also just be open to having people share their learnings with you.
Well said. So let's now move to your book, Tissa, No Permission Needed. Tell me about your book, but before the book, is it available on Amazon?
It is. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Audible.
Okay.
And really exciting. Just at the end of last year, we won 3 awards for the book. So
Wow,
very exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out the book, No Permission Needed, written by Tissa Richards. I'll go and check it out myself. Tell me about the book and what was your hypothesis?
Yeah, so really the book is about sort of as a leader and or sort of a person starting out in your career. Number one, you don't need permission to figure out who you are, why what you do matters, and how to tell the world. And I think especially for women, a lot of people wait for that permission. But really, the subtitle is sort of unlocking your leadership potential and eliminating self-doubt. And a lot of people, 90% of leaders experience self-doubt on a regular basis. So it's built on a framework of what I call FAIR leadership, FARE. And that's fearlessness, authenticity, resilience, and effectiveness. And it's a very pragmatic book, which is really what I'm known for. So how do you figure out the value you bring to the table, the values you operate on? Lots of exercises, stories from real people, amazing people, and sort of a workbook. So it's a fast read. It was really designed to not just motivate people, but when you come out of it and finish reading it, you'll have this very crisp sense of how to describe yourself in 2 sentences, how to tell the world, this is how I operate and why, and really have this sense of why what you do matters.
And do you want to share any one of the stories that you've written about?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about leadership. So a lot of the book is about how to sort of say what you do, so what. But I want to focus more on the leadership side. So I have a wonderful client who's a chief, a CISO and a CIO. And we were looking for a role for her, and she had 2 really great opportunities. And at that point, it really became how exciting was the work and the team she was going to work with. And I got a text from her. She went for her final interview with each company, and I got a text from her, and it was this really sad looking little lunch box with like a banana that was 5 days too old, and she was in the lobby all by herself. And I thought, well, what am I looking at? She was supposed to have lunch with the whole executive team, and she said, I don't know what happened to lunch. They sent me to the lobby, and it just feels wrong. It doesn't feel right. She said, so you know what? This is not the kind of culture, the kind of people that I want to work with. She said, am I wrong if I just tell them I'm not interested? And so it's the sort of, how do we make decisions based on, is this where you want to be? Is this the kind of leaders you want to work with? But it was just that picture is like burned into my mind of
amazing. What a great
banana
story.
that that banana will always be in my head. But it's how do you decide the kind of place you want to be, where you'll thrive?
Fascinating. And my last question to you, Tissa, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing experience and all the work that you've done as a leadership expert, and you run your own businesses, you mentor so many startup entrepreneurs, what would you say are 3 lessons you would like our viewers and listeners to take away?
Yeah, so I think these are very clear for me. Number 1 is know your values and your non-negotiables, because you can't come back from those if you don't stick with them. Number 2, learn how to communicate very clearly and succinctly. And number 3, don't mistake failure for defeat. They are not the same thing.
Very interesting. And on that note, thank you so much for talking to me. Your 3 amazing lessons are know your values, and what is non-negotiable for you. Communicate better, and make sure that failure is not to be confused with defeat. Thank you, Tissa, for speaking to me about your own journey, about all the work that you've been doing as a leadership expert. We went into a lot of questions on leadership, and thank you for answering so many of them so clearly. Thank you also for speaking to me about your book, No Permission Needed. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.